Hello, I'm Neil, and welcome to Works Well Retrospectives, where we discuss what works well and not so well with classic video games, exploring their development and the people and ideas that shape them. After recently receiving an Amiga 500 Mini for Christmas, I was keen to revisit some childhood favourites, the first of which being Lemmings. I have fond memories of Lemmings as a child, but other than some mobile versions since, I have not revisited the game. Will Lemmings hold up in 2026? Or will it fall from a cliff to its doom? Let's explore this together. Lemmings was developed by DMA Design, who were based in Dundee, Scotland. Scott Johnson, who had been hired as a freelance artist, was set with the task of drawing these little men in 16x6 boxes for the game Walker. Mike Daly, another developer of the game, put it to the team that the little men could be done in a much smaller 8x8 sprite box. So during one lunch breaks, Mike set about trying to prove this to the team, borrowing a colleague's Amiga to do so. Mike's animations were well received by the rest of the team, with Gary Timmons adding additional animations, as well as improving on the walking man animations, making the character less rigid as they walked. The team decided that the animations would be worth creating a game out of, which led to the first Lemmings demo being developed and shown to Psygnosis, the game's publisher, in late September 1989. After being greenlit for development, the team created a level editor built around Amiga's Dulux Paint interface, which the team at DMA were already very familiar with. As the editor was built into the game, it was very easy to quickly create and edit levels. However, there was a slight problem. Floppy disk routines were required for the level editor, which the team had reliability problems with. This led to the creation of the company's very own DMA DOS, a full set of disk routines which could be invoked from the CLI to read and write to. The majority of the levels were created by Gary Timmons, Scott Johnson and Mike Daly. There was a healthy rivalry between these team members in challenging each other to complete levels, which influenced the creation of trickier levels and more unique ways to complete them. So the team now had an abundance of very challenging levels. However, they surmised that they had little to no easy levels. This led to Gary Timmons creating some simpler levels, or easier versions of the hard ones. The music and sound effects were initially created by Brian Johnson, Scott Johnson's brother, who was inspired by TV 60s theme tunes including Mission Impossible and Batman. Scott's mother was the voice of the Lemmings, although this did get sped up later in development. Later on, Psygnosis hired Tim Wright to create the Lemmings tunes, including How Much Was That Doggy in the Window, which unbeknownst to Psygnosis was in copyright. They were later sued and had to settle to include the song in the game. On launch day, Psygnosis would phone hourly telling the DMA team the latest sales figures, shipping 55,000 copies on the Amiga in the first day alone. To put that into context for game sales at the time, two of the DMA founder Dave Jones's previous games had sold for 20,000 and 40,000 copies in their entire lifetime. In all, it had been estimated that the sales of the original Lemmings would have exceeded 15 million copies worldwide. There is a detailed breakdown of many of the levels and how they were created on the Lemmings history blog post on lemmings.info, which was written by one of the developers, Mike Daly. The link is in the description below. Now for a retrospective look at the game to see what works well and not so well. When booting up the game, you get a cinematic, or cutscene as I would have called this back in the 90s, where the Lemmings float from a hot air balloon safely with parachute-like umbrellas, before traversing a grassy landscape, demonstrating some of the roles and skills that can be assigned to the Lemmings in the actual game. I think this cutscene does a really good job at setting the scene and makes up for the simplistic graphics, which I feel sometimes look like they're more in line with the 8-bit era of video games rather than the 16-bit capabilities of the Amiga 500. When I think of Lemmings in my head, the ones in the cutscene are what comes to mind, so I believe the cutscene works well at tricking your brain into seeing these simple yet expressive 8x8 sprites at this game's version of the Lemmings. The game is split between 4 difficulties: fun, tricky, taxing and mayhem. Surprisingly for a game of this era, the early fun levels introduce you to a new mechanic or two per level, breaking you in gently, demonstrating the skills you can give to the Lemmings, as well as the need to occasionally sacrifice a lemming or two in order to succeed. For this, I'm going to give the game a works well for the difficulty curve. My 10-year-old daughter, who has never played a game from this era, was able to figure out the early levels without any assistance and got a lot of enjoyment from the game. Each level title gives you a hint on how to reach the goal. detailing the number of lemmings, percentage to be saved, release rate, and time limit. It is then up to you as the player to decide how you will complete the level. There are sometimes multiple ways to complete levels, sometimes they're less clear, and some trial and error is needed to accomplish the level. With a handy nuke button, acting as a restart of sorts, humorously blowing up all the lemmings at once so that you can quickly restart after making any game-ending mistakes. On completion of a level code, in lieu of the ability to save, allows the player to pick up where they left off when rebooting the system. This works well for this type of game. There isn't really need for any state between levels, so a passcode or a password is all that you really need. Allowing the player to pick up from where they left off when they reboot the system, which is not at all punishing, which is a bonus for a game from this era. As children, we would share these codes on the playground, often cheating our way to higher levels from friends who had codes from later stages. If I remember correctly, there was also codes to unlock skills and increase their usages, but I've avoided these on my replay to experience the game as intended. Levels in the taxing and mayhem difficulty really force you to think outside the box. You have to make use of multiple skills, limited to a handful of each at times. You need to execute these skills precisely, leaving very little margin for error. If you create a staircase too many with a climber, for example, you won't be able to cross a later platform due to the fact that you're, say, limited to only 5. Personally, I feel these types of levels work well, in giving the player a healthy challenge, which is quite satisfying when you eventually get the perfect position and way to execute the skills, enabling the completion of the level. For example, in the level Every Lemming for Himself, one lemming keeps the rest blocked off, while a second uses the climber skill to traverse the left directional wall before using the builder skill to force the lemming into a small wall on the right so that it turns around, allowing the same lemming to use the basher skill to make a route through the wall for the existing lemmings. This same lemming then needs to create 5 precisely placed brick staircases for the rest of the lemmings to quickly follow them along, allowing them to start making their way to the right. Maneuvering the single lemming and the other group of lemmings in parallel is essential due to the tight time constraints in the level, which adds an additional layer of challenge. Having said all this, the level designs do occasionally seem slightly inconsistent. While some levels make use of a broad spectrum of different roles, many over rely on the builder skill, which it being the only real way to build across and upwards. Others feel like they are occasionally down to chance, where you can get lucky with the basher skill to break through walls. These inconsistencies work not so well, but fortunately are very few and far between. And with there being 120 levels, this is easily forgiven. The music in the game remixes a lot of songs from the public domain, which are often catchy and, depending on your mileage, work really well at keeping you hooked, especially on the trickier levels where the upbeat tunes keep you engaged. The sound effects are comical and work well, for example the "oh no" of a lemming about to explode and the sounds of the last 3 bricks being laid to indicate that your builder is about to stop building and allow you to take quick action with a follow-up skill. In conclusion, Lemmings is a fun yet increasingly challenging puzzle game that I feel still holds up today. Gamers of all ages should definitely entertain giving this a go in 2026, given how smooth the difficulty curve is. The game's opening cinematic, catchy music, and effective use of sound all contribute to an engaging experience that encourage you to save as many of these little creatures as you possibly can, in the most efficient ways possible. So, tell me your thoughts on Lemmings. Is this something you have played before? Something you'd likely to get into? Add your comments below, and let's discuss what you feel is your retrospective view of this game. Until next time, I'm Neil. This has been Works Well Retrospectives. Thank you for watching.